At the last moment, the American couple drove the idea of going to Sudan. They were advised by some Sudanese Christians who were living as refugees in Cairo not to travel to that country. Accordingly, after spending 2 weeks in Cairo, Malik and Malika were faced with two choices, either to return to their country or move to another Muslim country. They chose to travel next to the United Arab Emirates. Out of the 7 emirates, they selected Dubai. The choice of that emirate was done on the basis of a quick search on the internet. Their search revealed that Dubai was the first Arab country to respect human rights. It was the only country in the world that had the world's only 7 stars hotel, which is known as Burj Al Arab, or the Tower of the Arabs. On the same day, they arrived at Dubai. Malik and Malika were advised by one of the hotel's staff to go to the Dubai Square to find the subject of their search. The informer told them that, over there they could find women from all walks of life and from all over the world. The boy, who disclosed this important piece of information, happened to be a Muslim from India. Before we find out what kind of experience the couple went through in that famous Dubai Square, let us first talk a little bit about the young women who gathered there. Why should young women gather every evening around an open place? First of all, the square had 4 gathering spots or corners. Each corner had specific type of women. Let us begin with the lowest group and ascend gradually until we reach the highest group. I hope after this account, no one would accuse me of being racist or chauvinist or the like. If what I am going to say isn't the truth, I will never dare to speak a word about those young women. This is a true information that had been disclosed to me by a first-hand witness. It was a Sudanese woman who lived in that Arab emirate from childhood until she immigrated to a Western country. She was a victim of abuse from childhood. Her parents sold her in marriage to a grown-up man, when she was just 13 years old. Her first husband abused her sexually and physically for 2 years and then divorced her and married a younger girl. By then, she had already given birth to a son. After that, no man came to marry her and she remained a divorcee for a long time. In the Arab world, a divorcee was called a second-hand or an open woman, not virgin. She was condemned to either remain single all the rest of her life or marry an old man who was having other wives and children older than her. Nevertheless, that Sudanese divorcee decided to pursue her academic career so that she could find a better opportunity in a male-dominated society. She continued with her studies until she entered the University of Dubai. On her second year, she fell in love with her professor and eventually she married him. However, her second husband was as old as her father. She thought that, having been a highly educated man, he might give her what she had been denied from childhood: real love. Nevertheless, this second husband abused her more than her first husband. If her first husband was the devil, her second husband was the Antichrist himself. As soon as she married him, he stopped her from completing her university study. He began to beat and torture her. He always spent his money on prostitutes and call girls at the discos and nightclubs. Every night, he deserted her on bed and spent his nights on the arms of those prostitutes. He slept with her once in 2 or 3 months. Whenever she objected to his improper behavior, he beat her. He continuously reminded her that Islam required that the wife should be satisfied with whatever amount of sex her husband could give her. Her father always stood on her husband's side and reminded her that the Quran allowed the husband to beat his wife. He often quoted to her Surah 4 verse 34, which commands the husband to beat his wife. Moreover, whenever she went to complain to him about her husband's beating and negligence, the father told her that she would bring great shame to the family if she got divorced again. Finally, that frustrated Sudanese woman decided to trick her husband with the hope of escaping her abusive marriage life. Somehow, she convinced him to apply for immigration to the West. Many foreign workers in the Arab Gulf countries would like to get Western passports to enhance their statuses and be for them backup opportunities in case they would lose their jobs. There was no job security in the Arab countries. Any moment, your Arab employer could fire you without giving any reason. Immediately after you lost your job, you would be escorted to the airport by the police authorities. If you tried to hide, the consequences would be worse. Many foreign workers were chained to their seats inside the airplanes and shipped over to their countries of origin in that inhumane exodus. That Sudanese woman was able to convince her husband to apply for immigration because he was a foreigner from Sudan. Although she was born and brought up in Dubai, she was not entitled to citizenship. If you were born and lived for 50 years in those petrodollar Arab countries, still you would live and die as a foreigner. You could be kicked out of the country any time and without any cause. You and your wife and children would have statuses as makfulin, or slaves, and your kafil, or master, would have absolute right on you and your family. Anyway, to cut long story short, when that Sudanese woman reached Canada, she disobeyed her husband and refused to return with him to Dubai. Her husband knew that, if he beat her or tried to force her to return with him, he would go directly to jail. He knew and understood that his Quran won't clear him from the charges of domestic violence and woman's abuse in a Canadian secular court. He simply swallowed up his pride and returned all alone to the Arab world. He couldn't take his 2 children from her. And that is how she was able to extricate herself from her abusive husband. Many Muslim women were victims to this kind of abuse, and the only escape available to them was to leave their countries and move to the West. However, such golden opportunity wasn't available except for a very few. Many married Muslim women would prefer to kill themselves than continuing in those abusive marriages. The only method of suicide they knew was burning their bodies. Sometimes, a Muslim woman might choose to run away from her abusive husband to escape that hellish life. Unfortunately, when a Muslim woman chose to run away from home, the only place would receive her would be the streets. Therefore, those runaway women might fall in more trouble than what they endured in their homes. After this brief introduction, let us head back to the young women and try to find out why they are gathered there. Some of them came from Muslim countries that torn apart by wars such as Somalia, Syria, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, and Lebanon. Some of them came from poor Asian and African countries. Every evening, until late into the night, many of these young women gather around the red traffic lights square, Dawar Dubai. There were 4 such gatherings, with each group gathered in a particular corner of the square. The first corner is called the Ethiopian spot. Naturally, the name derives from the fact that the young girls here come from Ethiopia. The services rendered by Ethiopians have a going rate of about 50 to 100 dirham. At the time these accounts were recorded, $1 equals 3.67 dirham. The second corner is called the Somali spot. Somalian, Eritrean, Chadian, Sudanese and Mauritanian girls gathered at this place. Some customers referred to the first and second spots as the African girls' spots, because both the Somalian and Ethiopian girls were from African countries, with distinctive darker skin and curly hair. Other common African attributes were a larger build, large backsides and huge breasts. Despite the fact that these were common traits, the Somalian girl always commanded a higher rate than the Ethiopian. The Somali girl charged between 150 to 200 dirham. This discrepancy stands despite the fact that both of them are Africans, and as a general rule, most Ethiopian girls are prettier than their Somalian counterparts. Well, the difference in rates has nothing to do with beauty or any external attributes. It is simply due to religious affiliation. To make this point plausible, one should call to mind the question of halal meat versus haram meat. If Muslims visit or sojourn in non-Muslim country, they would not eat food in any restaurant belonged to an infidel or buy meat from non-Muslim stores. Their religion strictly forbids them to eat the meat of animals, cows, sheep, chicken, if they are not ritually slaughtered. Firstly, the killer of the animal should be a Muslim. Secondly, he has to physically face the Black Kaaba. Thirdly, he has to shout loudly, Allah Akbar. Then, and only then he can cut the neck of the animal. I hope no one misunderstands me. The Muslim is supposed to shout Allah Akbar even if he wants to kill a human being. Those of you who resent the recent cruel and barbaric beheadings of Westerners which were executed by a British Muslim, known as Jihadi John, and uploaded by ISIS, should remember that the actions were carried out in according to this teaching of Islam. The phrase, Allah Akbar, can be precisely interpreted as God is greater, but in Islam it has deeper meaning. It is an exclamation of war. Whenever a Muslim wants to slaughter someone or blow something up, you will hear this cry. Islam requires that shout of war even if the creature to be killed is a human being. Accordingly, if you happen to be in a crowd, a bus, a train, or any place of social gathering and you heard someone shouting Allah Akbar, run as fast as your legs can carry you. Not surprisingly, Islam allows Muslims to have sexual intercourse with infidel women if they are taken as war captives, but forbids them to eat meat if the animal was killed by an infidel. According to Islam, all non-Muslims are infidels, which include the Christians and Jews. All infidel women are halal for sex if they are captured in a war. Christians, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, atheists, Satanists, etc. Their women are halal for sex, but their meat is haram to eat. The biography of the Prophet Muhammad tells us that he used to have sexual intercourse with a Christian Copt called Maria and a Jewish girl, known as Rayhana. Both of them continued to follow their respective religion until he died, and he never married any one of them. I know that it is unfair to equate human beings with meat. That is exactly how the working girls of the red traffic lights square are valued by their Arab customers. The Ethiopian girls were sub-par because they were infidel Christians, when the Somali girls were premium because they were Muslims. There was yet another reason behind that unfair evaluation of the Ethiopian girls that has nothing to do with the concept of halal meat versus haram meat or Muslims versus infidels. Suffice to say, the Somali girls possessed something that gave a distinct advantage over the Ethiopian girls. Simply put, the Somali girls were genitally mutilated while the Ethiopian girls were not circumcised. Female genital mutilation, besides being a religious obligation in Islam, many Muslims believed that it endowed many advantages to the girl, her family, and her husband. We will discuss the evils of female genital mutilation in later chapters, but now let us say just a few words about it. Female circumcision or cutting involves the removal or the sealing of the labia majora and the labia minora together after the entire clitoris has been removed. Lois 1985, page 115. When the Muslim girl undergoes the operation of female genital mutilation, she will become abnormal. Her private parts will be completely mutilated and destroyed. Her vagina will be so narrowed or so sealed that it will be reduced to a small hole, which allows her only to urinate. The woman who performs the circumcision uses a razor or kitchen knife to cut and remove the entire clitoris. At the same time, she will slice the labia majora and labia minora and then seal them together and leave just a small opening. She will use a small reed or feather to measure the hole that should be left open after the circumcision. Usually, most of the Muslim girls would be circumcised at the age of 4 or 5. Muslims believe that when the circumcised girl reaches the age of adolescence she will not be able to indulge in sex even if she wanted to. Any girl trying to indulge herself in sex will experience unbearable pain and feel as if she is being raped. This is the overriding reason for this procedure, to prevent her from having sex before marriage. Therefore, female genital mutilation or circumcision is meant to control the sexuality of the woman and destroy her desire for the opposite sex. In this line of thinking, there is a belief among Muslims that the uncircumcised girl can easily succumb to her sexual desire. Even if her underwear rubs or scrapes her private parts, she will experience uncontrollable sexual desire and nothing will abate her desire for masturbation or adultery. This is simply not the case for a circumcised girl. She is always in control of her sexuality and is very hard to arouse. Due to the small hole that had been created in her privates post-circumcision, the girl is considered always virgin. Muslim men believed that the circumcised girl is more sexually enjoyable than the uncircumcised girl. For that reason, the Somali Muslim girl is rated for a higher price than the uncircumcised Ethiopian Christian girl. The third group is known as the Iraqi girls' spot. Majority of the girls in this group came from Iraq. The fourth group is known as the Lebanese girls' spot. Naturally, most of the girls in this group are from Lebanon. Due to the current situation in Syria, both groups are infiltrated by Syrian girls. With the exception of the Iraqi girls, the rate of each Arab girl in both these groups hovers around the 250 to 500 dirham range. Although, the Iraqi girls are also Arabs, still viewed equivalent to the Ethiopians, commanding between 50 to 100 dirham each. Don't ask me why the Iraqi girl is underrated. We have already seen that the Ethiopian girls are undervalued because they are Christian infidels and uncircumcised. None of these conditions afflict the Iraqi girl. There is no obvious reason for such unfair treatment. Some rumors have it that the discrimination has to do with Saddam's invasion of Kuwait. When Iraqi soldiers invaded Kuwait, they indiscriminately raped all the women found. At that time, there were Arab women from all over the Arab world and very few escaped this fate. Accordingly, today every Arab man wants to take revenge on those displaced Iraqi girls. Maybe those rumors are true, but still one may ask, how can someone distinguish the Iraqi girl from the Lebanese girl or Jordanian girl, or the Syrian girl from the Egyptian or Moroccan girl? After all, they are all Arabs and look alike. Although, all Arab women speak Arabic and look alike, their respective regional accents betray them. Yet, a few more facts need to be mentioned before we pass on to the fifth group. Due to the situation in Syria, the presence of the Syrian girls at that Dubai square had increased to the point that they are the largest group in the square. Before the civil war in Syria, the Iraqi girls had that distinction. Iraqi and Syrian girls who escaped from their homeland do so for fear of being taken captive, raped, and sold as slaves. Today, an Iraqi Yazidi girl sold in the Mosul slaves auction can command $115. ISIS forcibly circumcises all their captive women. As we mentioned already, circumcision is obligatory for every male and female in Islam, and that by cutting off the piece of skin on the glands of the penis of the male, and removing out the female's clitoris and cutting and sealing together both the labias and leaving a small opening for the girl to enable her to urinate. ISIS, members of the Islamic Caliphate states Mujahideen, come from all over the Arab and Muslim world. Hundreds of them come from the UK, France, the USA, and other Western countries. They head for Syria and Iraq for the purpose of jihad and capturing female slaves or obtaining the Shahada, martyrdom resulting the reward of virgins of paradise. They observe a kind of Islamic jihad known as Jihad al-Nikah, holy jihad for capturing women and having sex with them, then selling them as slaves. Before we move to the fifth group at the Dubai Square, we must also talk about the Asian girls. Sadly, the Asian girls are not allowed by the other four groups to have their own spot at any place at the red traffic lights. They are treated as subhumans. Most of them are Pakistanis, Indians, Filipinos, Bangladeshis, Afghanis, Indonesians, etc. They are scattered everywhere. Besides, being discriminated by other groups, they also are ill-treated by the police. Every now and then, one of their number will get arrested, beaten, and raped by the cops. They are routinely mistreated by their customers too. Very often, they are treated as slaves and forced to render services to their captives without pay. They have no value and hence it is very hard to decide their rate. The fifth group consists of local women, understandably called the local group. This group is invisible. Only their pimps and assistants gather there. Most of the girls in the other four groups are unmarried. One peculiarity of this group is that the women are all married. The going rate for women in this category starts at 1,000 dirham and can climb to 5,000 dirham. Sometimes, a woman of this category may charge up to 10,000 dirham. One may wonder about this logic. Simply put, the answer to this question has something to do with the Arab's sexual preference. The Arab man loves nothing more than having his relative, neighbor, or friend's wife in bed. Even the Prophet Muhammad had the same problem. His biography said that he had uncontrollable desire for the wife of his adopted son. This happened when he visited one day the house of his son and didn't find him at home. Instead, he found his daughter-in-law reclining on her bed while she was semi-nude. He desired her and murmured some words which were interpreted by Allah that the Prophet wanted her, but in the halal way. When her husband returned home, his wife told him about the visit of his father and how he reacted when he saw her semi-nude. Then, the son went to his father and said to him, "If you like my wife, I will divorce her so that you can have her." The Prophet said to him, "Keep your wife to yourself and fear Allah." At once, Allah revealed a verse in the Holy Quran and rebuked the Prophet for fearing people and hiding in his heart what he desired, Quran 33:37. To the effect, that the Prophet compelled his son to divorce his wife and therefore he married her and took her to his bed on the halal way. That is why, the women of this invisible group are so highly priced and prized because every Arab man wants to have on bed, the wife of his neighbor or friend or even his colleague or boss. Whenever such a desire strikes him, he will bribe one of the pimps and ask him to get her for him. The pimp will not leave a stone unturned in order to satisfy that urge. In fact, most of those married women are already suffering from sexual frustration. They are victims of polygamous marriages, with husbands habitually get younger and prettier girls and marry them. Once the polygamist husband gets a younger wife, he will hardly sleep with his other wives. Therefore, those deserted wives look for sexual satisfaction from their husband's drivers or somewhere else. Marital infidelity for them becomes sources of pleasure and getting some extra cash. Practicing premarital sex for unmarried local girl can lead to honor killings. Also, the girl will be killed if she is caught having affair with a man before marriage. If she indulged in a sexual relation before marriage and her family did not know about it, her husband will find out that she isn't virgin on their first wedding night and the consequence will dire. However, the married woman will tell you since she is already opened, she does not fear of being caught and slain in honor killing. In that society, the honor of the family is between the legs of the woman. Some of the young women are displaced from their homes and forced to flee due to wars in their countries, Iraq, Syria, and Somalia. Some left, heading for rich petrodollar countries. Asian and African girls are forced by poverty to leave their countries and come to Dubai on maidservants' visas. The foreign maidservants begin to experience abuses at the point of arrival. As soon as such a foreign maidservant arrived in the house of her employer, she will be openly sexually harassed by the male members of that household. The father, his grown-up sons, and any other male relatives feel it is their rights to have sexual intercourse with their maidservant whether she consents or not. The maidservant will work from sunrise to sunset as slave, and from evening until dawn she will be forced to sleep with whoever wants her on his bed. Many prominent religious leaders in Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries issued fatwas that justify the treatment of the foreign maidservants as right-hand possessed, female slaves. According to those fatwas, the Arab employers are allowed to have sex with their maidservants against their wishes and with full knowledge of their wives and daughters. Therefore, raping a maidservant is not considered a crime, but religious right to her employer. Moreover, their employers are known as kafiles, masters or owners, and they are called makfulat, slaves or possessed. By law, their owners can kick them out of the country any time he wants. He can beat them or rape them. If an employer kills his maidservant, he can get away with it. After all, Islam forbids capital punishment to any Muslim who kills a non-Muslim. The reverse is not true. There is one last group we need to say a few words about it. It doesn't meet the definition of a group as the other 5 groups do. It has neither female prostitutes nor male prostitutes. There are no bisexual prostitutes either in this group. If they are neither males nor females or even bisexuals, then what types of creatures are they? They aren't even the beautiful Hur al-An, virgins of paradise, which are mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah. Hur al-An are not human beings, but sublime female creatures created by Allah especially for the sexual enjoyment of Muslim men in paradise. This group consists of earthly human beings like you and me. They, however, don't consider themselves like other girls. They insist that they are not prostitutes although they perform the very same services. They charge money for their services, but call them wages. They charge their customers by the hour. Before she goes with her customer, the girl of this category will ask him how long does he want her under his service. Simply put, the girls of this group don't like to be called prostitutes because Islam doesn't recognize them as such. Therefore, by order of the law, anyone calls them prostitutes will be prosecuted. You have no even any legal ground to name them religious prostitutes. The only difference from other girls, the girl of this group will ask her customer to marry her before she goes with him. The marriage business for her is an imperative. If the customer refuses to marry her, she will never ever allow him to touch her body no matter how much amount of money he may propose to pay her. She will tell him that she is a Muslim girl and her religion will not permit her to have sexual intercourse with a man except in the halal way, legal sex. If he agrees to marry her, then she will go with him to his bed in his house, or in the open desert, and even in his car if he wants backseat sex. She will agree to a blowjob, but even that also has to be performed under the conditions of a marriage and halal sex. If her customer consents to this halal sex, then and only then she will sleep with him. Wow! Someone may say what a good girl she is. Most of the girls who practice this kind of service are from Iraq, Iran, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, and the United Arab Emirates. They are all Muslims. If they are Muslims like other Muslim girls, why do they charge wages and demand a marriage contract before indulging themselves into this kind of practice? They are Shiite Muslims and other girls are Sunni Muslims. They also are prostitutes, but the kind of prostitution they practice is considered halal in Islam because it is done under the cover of marriage. It is called muta marriage, or enjoyment marriage. Muta marriage is a temporary lawful relationship between a man and a woman. The relation can last for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, etc. The muta marriage doesn't require a judge or witnesses. The man has to say to the girl, "I marry you myself," and she also has to say to him, "I marry you myself." Then, he has to pay her wages as her dowry, or her vagina's price. As soon as their private marriage is consummated through sexual intercourse, the man has no any legal right over the muta wife. She can go immediately and contract another man in another muta marriage. In one single night, she can marry more than 10 men. This kind of marriage differs from the ordinary marriage because it doesn't aim at a continuous married life, but the sexual enjoyment in a lawful way. It had been permitted and practiced by the Prophet Muhammad, but abolished after his death by his second caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab. The Quran justifies and encourages this kind of prostitution. See Quran Surah Al-Nisa 4:24. The Shiite Muslims argued that the Caliph Umar had no legal ground to abolish it because it is permitted by the Holy Quran in Surah 4:24. According to Islamic theology, no one has the right to abolish or abrogate any verse of the Quran after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. Nevertheless, the muta marriage is unlawful in Sunni Islam, but practiced by the Shiite Muslims until today. In Iran, it is estimated that over 70% of muta wives become prostitutes. Wood Small 1983, page 119. Nonetheless, the girls of this group will not agree to be identified as prostitutes. We can't call them temples prostitutes because they don't do their muta marriages at the Muslims' holy shrine at Mecca, inside the Black Kaaba, nor do they practice them in mosques. Any sexual relation between man and woman outside the marriage bond is forbidden in Islam except with female slaves, or right-hand possessed, or war captives. I guess the proper name for the girls of this category is religious hookers. Although mut'a marriages are forbidden in Sunni Islam, it has its equivalent in the so-called al-zawaj al-urfi, traditional marriage. It is a marriage between a boy and a girl without the knowledge of their families. It also doesn't need a judge or marriage contract. It requires the witness of only one person. Usually, schools boys and college students use one of their friends as a witness. In Sudan, every year hundreds of Muslim girls are impregnated through the so-called al-zawaj al-urfi. Babies born out of this kind of secret relationship are not recognized by the girls' parents and considered bastards in the society. After delivering their babies, they are thrown in garbage containers to be eaten up by stray dogs and die as outcasts. Before we come to the conclusion of these lengthy accounts, and before we mention what had happened to Malik and Malika on their visit to the Dubai Square, we need to speak briefly about another group of visitors. This group cannot be given the same status as the other 6 groups because does not consist of women. It is a group of young Arab boys who render the same service. We can't call them gays because gays in the West don't charge money for making love with their male lovers. They aren't lesbians either because they are not females. This group is called the 5th column of prostitutes. Whatever that phrase means, isn't the big issue. The big issue is that they are treated as women. Even though they have no specific spot at the red traffic lights, and they are scattered everywhere like the Asian girls. In the Arab world, the male prostitute talks like a woman, walks like a woman, has body like a woman, take care of his body like a woman, does makeup like a woman, wears females' perfumes, etc. The major distinction between the two, the former has a vagina and the latter asshole. In some Arab countries, the woman is called Jamal or the one who has a camel, or pussy. The other thing that distinguishes him from the woman, he puts on male's clothes. We cannot say the biological difference is a significant factor because most of the female prostitutes will agree to anal sex with their customers and charge extra. In spite of that, the male prostitute is highly prized and highly desired by Arab men. His price is higher than all the 4 groups, but lower than the 5th invisible group, the married local women. I do not understand the obsession of the Arab men for male prostitutes. Maybe homosexuality and homoeroticism is the rise in the Middle East because of the social segregation of males and females and the restrictions placed on the women. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has the highest number, followed by the Gulf countries. According to one British magazine, 23% of the Saudis are gays and lesbians. In a recent interview, a female schoolteacher at Riyadh City said that 90% of her female students admitted that they had sex with their female classmates or girlfriends. In Saudi Arabia, if a female prostitute is caught, she will be stoned to death, but if a male prostitute is arrested, he will not be punished. There is no punishment in the Sharia law for gays and male prostitutes. However, ISIS threw Iraqi and Syrian gays from high buildings as punishment for their perversion. ISIS referred to some unauthentic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad which prescribe that unhuman and cruel punishment for gays. Most of the Arab male prostitutes weren't born gays or made themselves that way, but were forced to be so when they were small children at homes or schools. Majority of them were victims of child abuses and child rapes by their male relatives, neighbors, school teachers, or older schoolmates. It is very common practice, in the Muslim countries, where there is no co-education in schools, that small children of 7 to 10 years old were forcibly sodomized by their male teachers and bigger classmates. Usually small children were subjected to rape at that early age. It is generally considered that children have delicate bodies like women. On their first visit to that red traffic lights square, the American couple understood that Dubai wasn't the right place to find data about the abuse of women in the Muslim world. They decided not to waste another day in that emirate. Moreover, Their visit to that infamous square exposed Malaika to even more sexual harassment than she had experienced during her Hajj's rituals. She was harassed and troubled by the lustful Arab men who came to feast on those young women who gathered there to sell their bodies. Some Arab men and pimps followed the couple until their hotel. Malaika felt as if she was a stray fish that chased by deadly sharks. All the time, she was accompanied by her husband, but that did not deter the mob. The obvious fact she was a married woman made them to desire her more and strive hard to get her. Malik threatened to call the cops on them, but that also did not cause them to waver. They continued to follow her like savage wolves chasing a deer in a jungle. They kept on whistling, waving their hands, showing their thousands of dollars, and shouting words in Arabic. Their words sounded gibberish to the couple as if coming from people possessed with demons of lust. Malik could not believe that intelligent beings living with him on the same planet Earth could behave in such a barbaric manner. They were so controlled by their animalistic desires that their minds cease functioning. Malik fully expected the mob surrounding his wife to rape her in front of everyone around when they reached the hotel. He silently steeled his will to stop this. They would have to rape Malaika over his dead body. Those Arab men had no respect for the sanctity of marriage nor believed in the concept of human rights. For them, the woman was meat, and when she exposed her face or parts of her hands and legs, then she would become fair game for every man walking on the streets. The concept of sex as mutual relation between two persons who loved each other did not exist in their vocabulary. Moreover, they had erroneous understanding of the Western woman that she was always free and ready for every male wanted her on his bed. Sex in Islam is called wat, which means stepping or climbing on the body of the woman. Marriage is called in the Quran nikah, which means sexual intercourse. Men and women are both victims to the perverse teachings of Islam about sex and marriage. These distorted teachings turn women into sexual prey and the men into perverse crooks. Therefore, the Muslim men see in the women nothing except fresh meat, which Allah has granted them divine rights to haunt and devour. Each one of them is permitted 4 wives by way of polygamous marriages, slave acquisition, war captives, or stray women on the street, etc. In that way, once he tires of his catch, he can look for more fresh meat. The former king of Saudi Arabia bragged in one foreign magazine that he slept with 200 women. The uncle of the emir, ruler, of Kuwait married 99 women. One day, he visited a girls' school and saw a beautiful 15-year-old girl. Then, he asked his assistant to propose that beautiful girl for him, but he was rebuked and corrected by his assistant because the girl was one of his daughters. Islam divides human beings into hunters and the hunted like wolves and sheep. It deprives a woman of her rights as human being and imposes female genital mutilation, child marriage, polygamy, wife-beating, body coverings, etc., on her. In many Muslim societies, women are not allowed to go to schools, to work, drive cars, go to gyms, practice any kind of sports, go to beaches, public parks, or participate in any kind of public entertainments. They are locked behind iron doors as if they are prisoners or wild creatures. Islam is the greatest curse that has fallen on women.